fab. If you don't, then the reinvestment becomes a real problem. So, like I was saying earlier, some of the challenges, we have to keep that in mind. Cycle time, the line yield, the wafer shipments, getting the product yield up, and then maintaining a healthy gross margin is really, really critical for sustained profitability and basically just for sustaining. So what can accelerate? Some of them are all well known, but I want to focus on one thing, which is collaborative innovation, which is very important, the partnership for success, because this is such a complex world, from process to design to system level. Everything has to work, otherwise your wafer volumes will never take off. And then if you go one level before that, which is the exploratory research, today we are looking at technologies 5 to 7 years away, the 10, the 7, and the 5 nanometer, for example. We have to be continuously investing and looking into all of that to make sure that we have the most competitive technology in the world. Starting from there, when you get to the fab, the operational infrastructure and support is very important. Almost every speaker touched upon it in the last day. The asset refresh, you have to continuously improve the tools and tighten the corners, tighten the process to be competitive. And process optimization and simplification based on learning is very important. And no matter what, I want to repeat, cost competitiveness is critical. Even though we may say we want to make in India and serve the Indian market, you have to be competitive at the global level if you want to sustain. What it takes is really an ecosystem. So if you look at the foundry and surrounding that, when you look at the fab-lite companies or fabless companies to assembly and test, to all those parts of the ecosystem, we have all of that in India. What is really missing is really the foundry. So it's a very strong connection, and there's a very broad ecosystem that's already there. So it's all favorable. But let's see what comes out of the panel discussion. So in summary, collaborative innovation is foundational. That's really what is important. If you look at our New York fab and the surrounding ecosystem, including the academia, the universities, that's where you have a regular flow of talent coming in, grooming them to the next level. It's all working very well. That is the kind of environment that is really needed for a new fab, and especially in a place like India. So the key takeaway is semiconductor is a key enabler, and then collaborative innovation is foundational to sustain profitability. Is India ready to take on? Let's see what the panelists have to say. Okay, so let's start with the panel discussion, and like I said, we have a rapid fire round immediately after that. Hopefully that was a good starting point. Thank you very much. So, we have distinguished panelists here, and I think the discussion is going to be quite interesting. So we're all ready to start, right? Okay, good, thank you. So let's just start with what are some of the key drivers for foundry growth, in India, or why India? So maybe Suraj, you want to start off?
Yeah, thanks. Actually, yesterday morning, my colleague Sunny had presented the case for high value-add manufacturing, and we had identified 3 levers for that. So basically, the 3 big drivers were economic value-add, ecosystem value-add, and strategic value-add. And if you listen to a lot of the presentations over the last couple of days, you would have seen that electronics qualifies in all ways in these economic drivers. And semiconductor manufacturing would be sort of the high end of that spectrum. So we believe that that is a natural fit in all these 3 different areas to be the drivers. One thing that we should bear in mind is that we should periodically re-evaluate these drivers with respect to the assumptions that went into this, and then make course corrections as required with respect to the priorities, which one you want to flex more compared to the other.
That's good. Raja, you want to add something to that?
Yeah, you could see when Subi was showing about the capex requirements and time to volume, if there's a delay and so forth, right? So the equipment cost is basically the same wherever you put it in. But then you need the talent to bring all that into fruition. Right? So these monetizing it, the time to volume, all that requires talent. So the view I have is a lot of the ingredients are already available in India. We are very good at it. We are highly innovative people. We're able to create industries despite or without too much of help from the government and so forth. So I think once you have the fab, which is a very big commitment, all the other ingredients that we already are good at will just collaborate together. We talked about the collaborative model, and we have a very very unique opportunity. Not many countries can say that, whether you look at Singapore or Malaysia and so forth, right? So we already have a very strong design community. We already have a very strong system development community. Although we may not be doing for our own, we may be doing for the US companies or European companies. Still we have the talent. So my belief is, once you have that fab, which is a huge financial commitment, all the other elements will fall into place, and within the next 5 years or 10 years, right, we would have a unique leverage in terms of the fab business itself.
That's good. So you believe we have all the ingredients, we can make it work, but I'm sure there are some challenges. So Srini, you want to give your view on what you see as the challenges that Suraj and Raja brought up?
So, generally speaking, I think before we get to something that we're always very good at telling ourselves what we're not good at. So I think it's probably a good idea to start with where we actually have advantages. Everyone's mentioned the markets as being a huge advantage. The design talent or the engineering talent on the downstream side of the fact is not in question. And I would actually even submit in this gathering that on the upstream side of the fact, from an equipment supplier's perspective, there is a very substantial talent and deep talent pool here in India for the design of equipment, the maintenance, the operation of equipment. A very deep talent pool both within the country and in the diaspora. So I think there's a lot of things that's right about this country. What we do have an issue with is probably the lack of a comprehensive ecosystem. And both in terms of a physical ecosystem and a policy ecosystem. Just to give a few examples, and these things have been talked about over the last 3 or 4 days, the last 2 days, that things like customs, inverted duties, attracting companies to come and build small components, small subsystems here, the ability to exit rapidly, to enter and exit rapidly. Most people don't invest in this country because there is no good exit policy. Labor policies, land acquisition policies, all these things have been talked about. And I think if the government got its act together, the other two pieces of the stool, the other two legs of the stool, academia and industry, is actually very willing and very ready to take advantage.
That's good. I'll come to Srihari in just a second. But Meenu, you have seen how semiconductor industry grew in Singapore. Do you agree with do you see the same kind of, or did you see the same kind of challenges that Srini was listing out, or is it different?
Yeah, I would just elaborate a little bit further on that. First, physical infrastructure is required. We also need a kind of a very special talent base. And as what was already mentioned, about there's already an existing talent base, and the one which has to for the equipment manufacturing, for example, for the design services and so forth, there's an additional one which will be required once the fabs come into place. So as far as Singapore ecosystem is concerned, which is a pretty mature system as far as the manufacturing is concerned, what was done there was to get all these 3 key stakeholders, which are the industry, the government and the academia into synergy to get the ecosystem working together. So it was that whatever is required to be done, so the policies, the regulations which have to be put into place, as far as the industry, as far as the academia is concerned, to give the talent. You have training programs, you have the content for the trainings, the structured way to do it. There is a WSQ, which is a workforce skill qualification program, blue-collar worker, high-level engineers. All that infrastructure has to be gathered. Grants and the curriculum to be kind of tweaked to meet the requirement of this industry, whether it's manufacturing or whatever, has to be put into place. So the academia comes into the picture. So what we have is a kind of conducive environment with policies, government being not only just the physical infrastructure, but as what was mentioned earlier, to have conducive policies for customs, for taxation, incentives for companies to come and set up base here, and it all kind of builds up together, and it takes a lot of time. So quite a bit of the things are already existing out here, and it's a matter of kind of leveraging and learning from the strengths and avoiding the pitfalls of guys who have already done that, and kind of expedite the process then rather than going and redesigning the field by itself. So that's what I would say.
That's good. Basically, there are challenges at all the three levels, right? One is bringing up the fab, and then there are challenges there. Operating the fab, there are challenges. And of course, how do you sustain profitability end of the day? All those three are critical. What we have seen, we also have started fabs in around the world. One of them is patient capital, okay? Because this foundry business is a very high barrier to entry, a lot of capex investment, and requires patient capital because it requires a long runway to really take off. So I would say that is one of the important things that we need to keep in mind. Anything you would like to add, sir?
If you look at it from the government's perspective, if you're asking in terms of key drivers, well, it has been quite loudly made it clear by the government that if you look at an economy of India's size, the kind of growth it is heading towards, the kind of consumers we have become, it makes sense actually to go for the complete value chain. And as you rightly pointed out, fab is a high investment, long gestation period investment, and it requires the entire ecosystem to be in place. But fortunately for India, we have the rest of the things in place. Only the fab is missing. So it's kind of why it is missing. That should have been the question instead of whether it's a key driver or not. It is actually, it has to be done.
That's right.
Logically. And secondly, as she rightly pointed out, all the three pillars, the government, the industry, the academia, they come together, then it has to happen. The happy news is the government is ready now.
That's good.
And
Good
I'm
to
sure
hear that.
India always had the talent to have academia. That's how we have been supplying the talent pool to the whole world. And industry normally looks for these two drivers and these two indicators to respond, and then industry will naturally jump because ultimately everybody is here to make money. In the long run, if it is going to make money, despite having entry barriers, we'll at least have few people who would know that this is going to be a
Very nice. Very glad to hear
positive
that.
thing.
Yeah, can
Please
I
go
answer
ahead.
that? Yeah, so one of the things that we should also keep in mind is that semiconductor manufacturing is a very high R&D intensive business. So while there is academia involvement, the kind of R&D that we are talking about that will result in a long-term sustained semiconductor manufacturing ecosystem requires us to think of more of practical R&D that will result in chips and products, scaled R&D. So that's something that we need to make sure